And then background for myself, we've homeschooled our kids since our oldest turns 11 early next year, and we've homeschooled him throughout. It's not something that we've just started in the last couple of years or whatnot. We use Classical Conversations is the co-op that we go to. Today was our co-op day. So when I got home, everybody was dragging a little bit as we got ready for dinner, and I went one way and Mom went another. But we love it and appreciate all that you all are doing to help families as well. And that's where then at KPI, it's the Kansas Policy Institute. We're a free market think tank, lower taxes, less regulations, all of that kind of thing. And you can't talk about those things in any state government without talking about education. It's half the state budget, never mind what the locals spend, right, at the district level. So anytime you're talking about state tax policy and things of this nature and spending, you have to talk about education and what you're getting. And as you all have lived more than I ever will, is that you're welcoming these kids for whom the public schools don't work for lots of different reasons, right? It's not because of just what they're teaching or how they're teaching it, or that not every kid, it just doesn't matter. But not in Wichita, there's 50,000 kids in the school, right? In the 259 school district. No system anywhere else in our life exists that can serve 50,000 kids equally well, right? And you all are a testament to that. So what we try to do, especially at the state level, is make it easier for educational entrepreneurs like yourselves to be able to do the work that you want to do. And that manifests itself in lots and lots of different ways. We're going to talk about education savings accounts a little bit this evening. But then backing up a little bit is in 2014, we passed a tax credit scholarship program, which we can talk a little bit more about, but quite frankly, it probably isn't a great fit for a lot of the schools represented here because of how the law works. But people make donations to nonprofits. Nonprofits then make scholarships of up to $8,000 a kid to attend a private school, but it's just for tuition to attend a private school. Then what makes it a tax credit is that then the taxpayer gets a credit off of their taxes, not just a deduction like you would for contributing to a 501c3. So nothing that I'm about to say should be taken as an endorsement of anybody or anything, except to say that in Kansas, we've never had a Democrat who has actively supported advancing school choice. So when Laura Kelly was reelected, it significantly kind of foreclosed some opportunities for education savings accounts. And I know you all know this, but I just think that's an important thing to keep in mind, right? We're not giving money to private schools. We're giving money to support kids as they are pursuing their education. So you have, Republican supermajorities in both chambers of the House and the Senate, and they were pushing very, very aggressively on education savings accounts. West Virginia and Arizona are just two of the most recent states that have universal ESAs, or education savings accounts. And I've got some material, and then we can talk a little bit more about it in just a sec. But those, kind of red and blue ideas are only worth so much. It really does become an issue of what those folks support when they're in the legislature. And like I said, as of right now, I don't think education savings accounts are really on the table as if I'm cutting through all of the malarkey, right? As a purely practical consideration, as long as Laura Kelly is the governor, right? But what that means, though, is when it comes to the school choice rally every year, and when it comes to pushing the legislature to stand up for individual kids and not just say, hey, we just need to do more of the same or what have you, is you all need to make your voices heard. And again, I'm not advocating that anybody engage in lobbying directly or anything like that, but the voices that you have, the kids and the families that you represent, are invaluable when we go to Topeka. Over the years, when we've spoken about school choice measures in the committees and whatnot, it's us, it's a couple of other different groups, it's a couple of the independent private schools, or CARES, which is the Kansas Association of Independent Religious Schools, that are the people talking about these things. It's been hard, frankly, to find individual parents because they're educating their kids and they're working and things like this. But then the people who are saying, hey, there's nothing worth changing, right? In the public education system, it's 4 or 5 to 1 when you're talking about who's testifying on either side of things. So if I had one call to action for you all, as much as you all are comfortable with this, is just going up and telling your story.
And do you know what date that is?
No, it's
I think it's
So the rally will be on either that Tuesday or Thursday during National School Choice Week. But what really matters, and this is what we'll be pushing for in this upcoming session, is we're still going to run a universal education savings account bill. And we're going to get that thing as far down the process as we can. And if that means that, the governor decides to veto it, then she can veto it.
So they can't override her veto? You don't have enough, you don't think, or is that
Didn't it
questionable?
what passed here that you could override the veto thing that we were talking, that we were voting for? Did that even, I forgot to even check to see if
So-
it passed or
Oh,
not.
A couple of different things.
Proposition.
So,
It didn't pass.
uh,
And that wasn't a veto, that wasn't about veto.
Right, so I'll come back to that in just a second. So, again, I'm supposed to be optimistic, right? And cast a vision for all the change that we can have in this state, but I have a hard time seeing how you override a governor's veto on this issue. At different times, there's been a couple of other issues that have been overridden on vetoes, and when you're talking about doing that, you have to get 84 votes in the House and 27 in the Senate in Kansas. So it's 2/3 of both chambers, and that's just an incredibly high bar to clear. It doesn't matter if, you could be in California, and have, kind of an inverse type issue, but overriding a veto is just a very high, kind of legislative bar. So it's hard to think that happens in the near future. But again, we'll welcome that opportunity. We'll welcome the chance for you, for other people like you to tell your story.
So when do you think, do we sign up to speak, or do you,
Are we talking about the rally, or are we talking about at a hearing?
at a hearing?
Okay, so that's where we don't know yet. It's typically pretty fast moving. Like we'll introduce a bill, and then the next week there's going to be a hearing. We don't really know when it's going to take place yet.
Oh,
So they
wow.
come into office in the middle of January every year. I don't have a calendar in front of me. It's like the week before Martin Luther King Day is typically when they come into session. And then things will go pretty hot and heavy for 6 or 7 weeks, and then it starts slowing down through March. Then they take April off and they come back in May. I'll share that with you, and then if it's something that you all are interested in, then I'll point you in the right direction of, okay, this is the committee assistant that you need to talk to here, and then you can call me and say, I've never done this before, what do I do? And I'll do my best to help through that. A good friend of mine works for a national litigation outfit and works a lot with individual clients who've had their rights violated and whatnot. And he said, all you have to do is tell your story, right? Leave it up to somebody else to talk about the ins and outs, the legal implications, the details of the statute or what have you. All you need to do is tell your story, and all you're trying to do is help kids and help families.
Yeah.
That's all you need to say. And then let people like me get our teeth kicked in with the hard questions and stuff. So school choice is the broad idea of, roughly stated, the money following a child wherever they're going to go, right? We all pay taxes to the state of Kansas, and that money in part goes to support, our local public schools. And instead of that money just going to wherever you happen to live, the idea of school choice generally is that the money would follow the kid to wherever they want to go. But then education savings accounts are one type of school choice. In lots of other states, you have charter schools, right? You have tax credit scholarships that we have here, virtual education, vouchers were more of a thing over 30, 40 years ago, and are less and less in vogue now for different reasons that may or may not be interesting. But then education savings accounts are kind of the leading edge of what school choice at the state policy level looks like, right? So it is a type of school choice, but it's just one type. And the easiest way for me to think about education savings accounts is they are a health savings account that's funded by the government, or something like a 529 plan that maybe some people use to save for college, right? Except again, that it's funded by the government. And that number can change anywhere from, maybe the beginning of this very long funding formula that we have for the state of Kansas. It starts at about $5,000 per kid, all the way up to our total spending per kid at $17,000 plus, right, on average across the state. It's not going to be $17,000, even if you had a champion for it in the governor's office. So somewhere between like $5,000 and $8,000 is probably what you're talking about. And not only can you use it for tuition at private schools, you can also use it for out-of-pocket expenses, curriculum, hardware, tutors, different kinds of interventions and counselors, and all sorts of other stuff. Some of that will be ultimately what's drafted and what I'll share with you, as we get into the teeth of the legislative session and have specific language that we can share. But those are those eligible expenses.
So I have a
Yeah.
question. So let's say, by some crazy grace of God, it did pass.
Right.
And let's say they set the rate at $5,000-$6,000, whatever.
Right.
If that family chooses to use that to go to a school, does the school get that full amount, or does the school get, like, is that?
It would. I mean, it would kind of. It could be that full amount, conceivable. People are busting your chops for not having high enough tuition.
Yeah.
So right, like if your sticker price is $3,000,
Raise it to 6, that's what he's trying to say.
Yeah.
No, I'm not.
No, I'm just kidding.
That's
Same as we have higher
exactly what I'm
education.
asking. Our tuition's stupid low, so do we get still the $5,000?
Probably not.
Okay.
That's why you need to up your.
Oh,
yeah.
January 1st, honey,
Yeah.
January 1st.
But I mean, honestly, that's something that we've thought about, right? Is if you subsidize something, are you going to increase the cost for something, right? In the private sector, what you're effectively doing is subsidizing in a certain way the education of kids. But that's where markets work, and I don't think it's really affected private school tuition there in any meaningful way. Certainly not outpacing the cost of what you'd see as kind of natural growth of tuition and things like this. But it's a real live question about how that's going to shake out.
One thing I've noticed as far as a benefit that's come from
Mhm.
that is that in these states where it's come about and this policy has been enacted, is that alternative schools are popping up.
Right.
And it's not just a fact of, oh, well, some schools are going to take advantage of this and they're going to raise their tuition so that they get that. There's still this, rather than them having the monopoly on that market, it's incentivizing some other schools to
Right.
pop up to compete for that too. So it keeps them in check.
Right, which is where it's a little bit different with, the kind of schools that you all are representing. I mean, we're talking to the Catholic schools and the independent, schools and collegiate and independent school and whatnot as well. Because, they're a little bit different, but, this kind of, more grassroots, very small school, type of a thing, it's gonna be a different experience than what you're gonna see at a more, conventional private school, be it faith-based or not. And then, the other thing that is always kind of, an issue is how does this interact with homeschool families? Which it seems like a lot of you all kind of play footsie with, or, what have you, in one way or another. And a lot of that, frankly, is up to how the law is drafted. It's hard, frankly, to see how it would, the Franko family runs Canterbury Classical Academy, right? We're registered at the state, that's the name of our school. It's hard to see us, paying, frankly, my wife to stay home. That's not gonna happen. But, or it's not gonna happen. It's unlikely that that's how a bill would be drafted. But you would be able to pay our co-op fees. You'd be able to pay, for our Math UC books.
Unless
and
your co-op opts to not be one of those that will receive them.
Right, and then that's the other thing here that always gives a lot of people initial, they sit up and they pay attention. It's whenever you're talking about government for one reason or another, everyone's like, okay, well, what are the strings that are going to
Freak some schoolers
Right.
out.
Yeah. And it's not just homeschoolers. I mean, I was, having a conversation yesterday with a couple of traditional private school people, and they were talking about what does all of this discussion, be it accreditation or tax credits or ESAs, what does all of this mean for them? And these are, bigger traditional private schools, and it even gives them the heebie-jeebies about what that means. And typically, we have not seen in a lot of other states a lot of additional regulations come on the private schools. That doesn't mean it can't happen, right? I'd be lying to you if anybody says, oh, it's never gonna happen. They're lying to you, run for the hills, right? It's highly unlikely that it's going to happen though. And I just don't see that being a real practical concern in Kansas. If you lived in some other states, maybe it would be a little bit more of a concern. but I just don't see it in Kansas. And then the other thing to always keep in mind when people, their spidey senses going is, if you don't want it, then don't take the money. So if it works for Freedom Prep, but it doesn't work for Creative Kids for whatever reason, because you're too concerned about the strings that come with it or what the strings are going to look like 5 or 10 years from now, then just don't take it. Right? And that's some of the major concerns that we see when it comes to education savings accounts, specifically in school choice generally.
Are not using their money. That money is now in this little account that's not my money, I don't get to touch it, but it's not going to her. Does that money build for them for their secondary, for college, if they would go there? You would be paying out of your pocket, it would be Hobo Joe money, but then this money would sit there and
You
build.
have to
Is that so?
You have to have claimed it.
Okay.
So like if I don't take it, if in this world, if we don't take it on behalf of one of our kids, you don't just automatically get it, and then when you graduate from high school, all of a sudden you have $60,000 sitting in a bank account.
Because if your
waiting
kid's in
for
public
you.
schools, they go to the public school.
Right.
That's what
You
I
have
was
to.
gonna say, so
Well, yeah,
if
but
there's
you
a
have
public
to-
school that
He's going
has
to
to
create
go,
But
then they're
he's
not.
going,
You
we're
have-
going here.
It depends from state to state. In some
Okay.
cases, public school kids are eligible. They get the money and then they'll use it to go out and they'll find a math tutor if they need math help or dyslexia. Or
Even
what
though
have
they're
you.
spending the $8,000
Yeah,
a
if
kid
they're going
in the
to
brick
the
and
public
mortar.
school.
Is that Arizona?
It just
That
depends.
has that?
Yeah.
Doesn't make any
Yeah.
sense.
What?
So
Wow.
it really does just depend, but you have to kind of claim the
That feels
account.
like
The
they're
money
double
doesn't
dipping.
just get put into a bank account or an account with the state treasurer's office, for 13
So
years.
how do you claim the part you're not spending?
Then
this
it,
minute?
like once you apply to, they are typically run through the state treasurer's office, not the State Department of Education for lots of different reasons. But, the state treasurer does 529 plans and all sorts of other stuff, so they're, financial officers, as it were. So you pass the law, you say, here's the eligibility requirements or whatever, then it's up to that family or that individual to say, I'm eligible, I want to start an account on behalf of little Johnny with the state treasurer's office. And then you start turning, depends on how you do it and what vendors they're using and stuff, but then the money doesn't actually ever come to the family, it's all held by, the treasurer's office still.
Naturally.
And then they'll either submit receipts or have a debit card or whatever it is to pay for eligible expenses.
Is there any
Wow,
difference
wait,
between general education and special education, or is that just a totally different?
You mean as far as how it's funded?
Well, I mean, special education students typically are going to cost more money. They
Right.
require more services. Is there a difference for? Yeah, I mean, honestly,
Pay scale, like a different.
I mean,
pay
I
scale.
have been paid through the district to tutor
Mhm.
my own child because of my credentials, I guess. I'm not that
Right.
cool, but it sounds good, right? But because of the training I've had, I was able to be paid to tutor my own child. That costs more money.
Right.
Like they were paying me more hour than they did when I worked for the district, So, are there more funds available for special education students, or does that change anything? Or
It depends.
okay, okay.
This is all theoretical based on
Sure.
baby that hasn't been born yet.
So
Right.
in, I think there's 3 states that have special education ESAs. So the only kids that are eligible for them
Mhm.
are kids who have an IEP
Mhm.
or whatever it's
504.
equivalent in a different state,
Okay.
right? And then there's a couple of states. Oklahoma actually has a voucher program, the
Right.
Lindsay Nicole Henry Scholarship Program for kids who are special ed. So sometimes when you're talking about that pool of children, the number gets bigger for
Mhm.
those very reasons, right? But then with more universal programs or programs that aren't targeted specifically to special ed kids, it's a fixed amount that's
Right.
somewhere around that dollar amount.